Guys, chess is one of the most cruel kinds of sports there is. Chess is merciless, and very often after a chess game, a person is devastated, dejected, furious. Let me show you 3 such games after which one of the players was in such a state of mind. One of them is mine from the UzChess Cup. I'm playing in the open section, and top grandmasters are playing in the masters section. So let's start by looking at Jan Nepomniachtchi's game against Nodirbek Abdusatorov. Nodirbek is currently top 4 in the world by rating. I think he shares 4th and 5th places with his compatriot Jawahir Sindarov. So he's obviously creme de la creme, best of the best. And NEPO has dropped some rating recently, but he wants to get back to the top of the top. And he's playing with the white pieces and putting some pressure in the English opening. NEPO plays lots of openings, but the English is one of his openings in his repertoire. This is, by the way, a reversed Sicilian defense, 4 knights system, so the same could have happened after e4, c5, and then the knights all get developed like this, and it's a similar position, but here it's white to move, so white has an extra tempo. White is playing the Sicilian with an extra tempo, which is, of course, a good thing to have. And this is a widely discussed theoretical position. There is bishop c5, there is knight b6, both moves are very popular. Also there is takes, I think, but Nodirbek sidesteps with the knight, and we get this position. I think it's all theory. Both players are blitzing out their moves. And here Nepo gallops with his knight to c5, and visually, you know what? White's position just looks amazing. When I was a kid playing semi-professionally, I used to play the English because I liked how the bishops are positioned, how geometry on the board works, and really I like White's position here. Bishop d5 is what Nodirbek chooses. He's out of prep probably. The engine says bishop h3 is slightly better. Now White piles up some pressure. Queen c2, now even more pieces go to the c file, semi-open, and Nodirbek decides to solve his strategic problems by dynamic means, which is a good thing to do. If you are strategically worse, if you have positional shortcomings in your position, you can initiate some chaos on the board, some attack, and then it doesn't matter that you have some like semi-open file that belongs to your opponent if your opponent is getting checkmated. So f5, Nodirbek is a very concrete, a very aggressive player, and he's never afraid of anything. And here he trades his bishop for the knight, which is logical. Yes, white now will have the 2 bishops advantage, but it's nothing too crazy. And here Nepo said that Nodirbek has committed a positional mistake by going e4, even though the engine says actually e4 is one of the top engine moves. But for a human, yes, this looks like a positional, like maybe not mistake, but like questionable decision, because now the uncontested dark squared bishop of white becomes a monster. This diagonal gets wide open, but probably Nodirbek was counting on the fact that he's creating some attack here, pushing and creating threats, and it doesn't matter that long term this bishop is a monster. Nodirbek also has pieces of his own. Knight goes to g5, now a5. Nodirbek wants to activate also this rook by pushing a4, but first he kicks the knight back, then he pushes a4, d3. Now Jan is doing everything in the way the Soviet school of chess taught him and me as well. You should challenge the pawn chain. Whenever your opponent advances his or her pawns, you should do something about them, harass them, because whenever one pushes their pawns, one creates weaknesses. When you push your pawns, for example, the f pawn has been pushed, now e6 and g6, those both squares are no longer protected by, controlled by a black pawn. So you should use those overextension in your opponent's camp by challenging this pawn chain. First of all, the queen gets attacked, queen drives back, they trade, and the engine says it's around equal, but humanly speaking, of course, white is pressing, because you see this open file, you see this file semi-open, you see this diagonal. It's very nice, and black had to go h6. Now g6 will be a permanent weakness, because after f5 and g6, no pawn will control g6. So long term, white is pressing, obviously. Knight f4, knight attacks the bishop, the bishops get traded. No longer 2 bishops advantage for white, but still this 1 bishop, I would say this is a 1 bishop advantage. AB, AB. Rook a8, h4. h4 also a very cultured move. Whenever you have a knight on f4, it's very useful to push h4 to prevent some ideas of g5 by your opponent kicking the knight, even though g5 would still be possible, but that would leave even more gaping holes in black's position after takes, and the h file also will become an infiltration possibility for white. So king h7, black is waiting. h5, white is taking more space and hinting at the fact that now the g6 square is up for grabs for white's knight in some variations. Rook a4, Norderbeck stays active, tries to go for some active counterplay. Rook a1, Jan decides to trade a pair of rooks because the a file belonged to black and now it belongs to white, which is a good thing usually. Whenever you have an open file, you should control it with your rook or queen. Rook drops back. And now this is like Norderbeck thought for 15 minutes. He was probably unhappy with his position and he retreated, and this is an inaccuracy. He should have gone rook before, going for counterplay against this pawn, but probably didn't like something about this, went back. And now NEPO seized full control of the d file, and both parties sidestepped with their kings to avoid some potential checks. And now b4. Now Jan is going for Norderbeck's throat. If black takes, comes queen b5, forking the knight and the b7 pawn, the queen infiltrates. It's bad news, close to losing for black, so black doesn't take this poisoned pawn. Instead, knight a5 attacks the queen. And white suddenly decides to trade this bishop for that knight, because that knight became too active. And yes, long term, that bishop was a good asset, but sometimes you have to give up some of your assets to establish your dominance on the chessboard, which is exactly what Jan does. Now, compare the pieces. The king for black is weak, king for white is never weak, it's never in danger. The knight on f4 is a monster, the knight on c8 for black is not good. The major pieces control the open file for white, for black they are doing not too much. The pawns are weaker, can get attacked from the c file, for example, from d7. So white is in the driver's seat here, but the pawns amount is equal, so anything can happen here. Queen c3 attacks the rook and the pawn. Rook drops back. Now we are putting pressure, we being the white player, on the c7 pawn. So c6 is a logical move. And now queen d4. Now NEPO is of course dictating the rules of the game here, but you still have to convert your advantage, you know. It's the hardest thing in chess, as they say, converting a winning position. This is not necessarily winning, even though the engine probably believes it's winning, but humanly speaking, it's just a position with a big advantage for white, but anything can happen still here. Rook e4, again, trying to harass the queen. Queen draws back. King h7, black is waiting. Rook c5, now white is becoming more active. Knight e7, and here the engine gives rook a5 as a very good move. Later on, white may infiltrate like this, and also there is a plan of rook a5 and then e3, which is a very important move because now the pawn is on e2. Remember this because in the further variations you will see why this is not so optimal. White rushed it a little bit. White went queen d7, very understandable human move, putting pressure on b7 and f5. But there, Norderbeck, NEPO later told him, I was watching the video after the games ended, because I was playing at the same time they were playing, I was playing my game. So I checked out the video broadcast later, and they had sound on after the game, and NEPO said, okay, queen b3, you tricked me with queen b3. I missed this resource, which is a very nice resource. Norderbeck goes for activity, and it seems like white can take on f5. And if black takes with the knight, queen takes f5 is a fork, and white emerges on top. But black is not obliged to take on f5. Instead, black can give a check. And after the king moves, now rook takes e2, and the queen suddenly attacks the rook. And this was the trick. So had the pawn been on e3, that would not be possible, you know. So that's the problem. So that's why e3 would have been better. So here we get to this position where white is still pressing, because there are some checkmating ideas when white puts the knight here, for example, and queen here, that would be a checkmate. But according to the engine, it's now equal, and both sides get an extra half an hour after move 40 by this point. But the game continues. You see this g6 weak square is the key reason why the game continues. And the adventures are not over yet. They're just beginning, let me tell you. So king h3, sidestepping with the king some checks. For example, if the knight moves, queen takes f2 now will not come with a check. c5, we go check. This is just waiting, not repeating the third time, but going rather knight f4. That was the purpose of the move king h3. Now, if black takes this pawn, it's not with check, and white will win because white will deliver this check and win the knight next. If black takes this pawn, white will win like this, check here, and knight g6. And next will come queen h8 mate, the mate that I showed you. So both pawns are poisoned. Both the f2 and c5 pawns are poisoned. Knight d4 is the only move for white, for black. And now we get to this knight endgame, where white has won a pawn. White has 4 pawns, black has 3. Endgames, all endgames are tricky. Chess is very tricky, but such knight endgames are specifically tricky. You will see that both sides will commit mistakes in this endgame, even though they are very strong grandmasters, obviously. So that just goes to show how hard chess is. So for the time being, everything that's happening is kind of logical. White is pushing some pawns. White has a king side majority. So in the future, g5 could be an idea. Well, probably the only idea, because you have to break somehow with your pawns to establish a passed pawn. And here, king d5 is a mistake. Is a mistake by Mustreader. He should have just waited. He should have gone knight d2 or knight d4. King d5 is a mistake because now the king is too far from the king side, and this gives a winning advantage to white. Now, but it's very hard. It's very not obvious. So both players were not sure after the game when they analyzed. Only after they saw the engine evil did they realize how winning this was for white at this point. But this is not over. King e6 drops back, king f4, knight d2, and now knight e5 is a very, very nice move, preventing the black king from going backwards and stopping the pawns. And after knight b3, you can win in different ways, but g6 is one of them. Just pushing g6, and after king f6, knight d7 check, king e6, and this is the crucial moment, the critical moment. Here, white could have sacrificed the knight by going king g5, and this is winning. If black takes the knight, we push h6, and after takes, we do not take the pawn, because then, if we take the pawn, black is actually winning. Black goes back, and after g7, black gives this check and wins the pawn for the knight, gives up the knight for the pawn, and then wins the remaining pawn and wins the pawn endgame. So king takes h6 is losing, but king f6 is winning because the pawn will be queening and black cannot stop this. So NEPO had to calculate this here, the king g5. Obviously, black is not obliged to take the knight. Black can gallop back with the horse, for example, knight d4, and the game goes on, but the engine says that this should be winning. But this is not obvious. Not obvious at all. I cannot calculate this line quickly till the end, and neither could Jan Nepomniachtchi. Instead, in this position, he did not go king g5, he went knight e5, king f6. Now he could have repeated with knight d7, but he decided to go knight d3, and suddenly it's a draw again. It's a draw again because the knight harasses the king with checks, and then the knight just finds this stable base on a6, and there is no way for white to break through. Unfortunately for Jan Nepomniachtchi, he gave up one pawn, took another, hoping to promote the g-pawn, but this nice trick made sure that black is drawing this game. So if white takes the knight, black takes the pawn. If white pushes the pawn, knight takes this pawn, so it's a draw. They made a couple of more moves. Now, funnily enough, Mustreader was trolling NEPO in this game. He was... I also checked the video later. He put his hand on the knight, and he hovered with his hand on the wrong square, on the losing square. I don't remember which one. Something like knight g5 or knight f4. So he was trolling NEPO, and then he did not let go on that square. He returned the knight to the correct square and put it on f8. And then after this, he again pretended that he's about to go knight d7, which is losing, but then returned with his hand to a different position, knight h7. He trolled a little bit NEPO, and then they agreed to a draw in this position. This was weird, by the way, this trolling, but it's fun content, I guess. So a heartbreak for NEPO, obviously, because he was winning at multiple points, and after this round, When I finished my game, I arrived at the venue where the masters are playing, and I was hoping to get some quick comment from NEPO, but he was not in the mood. Obviously, I can understand this. So NEPO is on 50%. Nodirbek is, I think, among the group of leaders. And let me show you another game of the round, which featured several brilliant moves, very beautiful stuff. So Nicolas Theodorou is playing Shamsidin Mohidov. And we have this position from the Queen's Gambit declined, which is exactly, by the way, the position that they had, Nicolas had against Jan Nepomniachtchi a round ago. And also this is a very popular line these days in the candidates. Many players play this with both colors, actually. So this is the position they get this time. White decides to push the kingside pawns, which is a bit risky because you weaken your position a little bit, but it is life. It is trade-off between things. You win some, you lose some. So here, White decides to go for aggression. Nicolas was in an aggressive mood. Maybe he ate something today spicy, but whatever it was, I liked it. So Black decided to give up the bishop for the knight to castle. And now, what White did is White decided to play this in the caveman style. So just go forward, attack, push pawn, mate king. This is the plan of White. This is not how you should play chess if you don't know nothing about the game, because very often when you just push pawns in front of your king, you become the victim, but Nicolas knows what he's doing. So he's pushing the pawns. He's also taking space on the queen side, and now he's pushing the pawns again on the king side. And now he's pushing pawns on the king side. And now he's preparing to push pawns on the king side by rotating the knight here. So first he rotates the bishop here, then b3 is a very cultured move, by the way, because it restricts the b6 knight. The b6 knight now has no future on b6, so it drops back now. Now bishop f4 prevents g5, knight d6 prevents bishop f4 prepares g5, obviously, sorry. And knight d6 tries to prevent g5, because then the f5 pawn would be hanging. So now knight g3 again prepares g5, because the f5 pawn is now protected. So everything White is doing is aimed at attacking Black's king and just killing it. So very aggressive play by Theodorou. Knight e4. Now they trade. Given the bishop for a knight is not always good, but here this bishop was not doing much, so Nicolas decided to give it up. And now to go g5. Finally, this pawn push happened, and the king sidestepped the g file, because that's where the action will be happening after it gets opened up. Now Black goes c5 to have some counterplay of their own. Striking in the center, you cannot take this pawn because the queen is pinned, and we get the straight. And now the g file is up for grabs for both sides, and actually sometimes it is White who gets in trouble in such positions. As I already told you, when you push pawns in front of your king, you may make weaknesses in front of your king. So unless White creates a powerful attack, Black can create a powerful attack. We will see what will happen. So rook g1, knight d3. The knight jumps to d3, a famous octopus knight from the famous game between Karpov and Kasparov, I think 1985, where Kasparov erected his knight on d3 and won very convincingly. This comes to mind. And there is a nice tactic that, I don't know, maybe Theodorou missed it, maybe he was fine with it. He retreated with his bishop to not get taken. And the tactics begin. Knight e5, very nice move. If you take, you lose the queen. So obviously that's not possible. Otherwise, Black is threatening a royal fork, winning at least a rook for a knight, which is exactly what happens. The king sidesteps, but now the queen and rook are hanging. And the engine gives advantage to Black. But Black is not in a rush to take this rook. Black's knight is no worse than this rook. Black, in the meantime, goes rook g8, taking the g file. And after d takes c5, only then takes. But still, White, when the engine thinks a little bit, the engine says that White is fine because White has the counterplay, even though White is down material. Because White has the counterplay against the f6 pawn once White goes bishop g5 and puts more pressure on it. That's why rook a6 overprotects this pawn. Now rook c1, a very creative plan by Theodorou. He wants to push c6 at the cost of a pawn to interpose this rook, or to trade the rook on a6 for the rook on c1. And then there is one defender less for the f6 pawn, and White will be able to go bishop g5. and put more pressure on this pawn, which is exactly what happens here. Takes, takes, takes. So we have given up the c5 pawn, but now bishop g5 comes. And we are threatening bishop takes f6 with devastating consequences. So black has to make way for the king, going h6. Both sides get an extra 30 minutes at this point. And the position is crazy. The engine says it's equal, but anything can happen here. So the king escapes to h7, bishop e5. This bishop is a monster. Again, similar to the game of Yan Nepomniachtchi, the unopposed dark squared bishop controlling the long diagonal is always a very dangerous weapon. But white's king is also weak, as I told you, and black wants to go for some counterplay. Queen d5. Probably black could infiltrate at some point and create some threats of their own. And here, for white, the best thing was to go queen c3 and then queen c7, putting pressure on the seventh rank, and the engine says it's equal. But white miscalculated here. White went bishop f4, probably wanting to go queen f6 and put pressure on h6, very logical. But here the brilliances start. Bishop h5, sacrificing the bishop, is a brilliant move, number one in this game. So if you take, black takes with the queen with check, wins back the knight, then the evil bar is glitching. Let me turn it off, but black is completely winning here because white's king is too weak and white has no counterplay. White just has one bishop for a rook, not even bishop and a pawn, so this is completely losing. So you cannot take this bishop, and the bishop of white used to stay on e5, so the f5 pawn was not under attack. So after bishop f4, this changed, and now it is under attack after bishop h5. So this is a deflection tactic. Okay, white does not take the bishop. White goes instead king h2, but this doesn't really help because bishop f3, now this bishop is just a monster. Now black's bishop is much stronger than it used to be because it is attacking white's king. And after bishop e5, queen d1, infiltrating, queen c3. And now the final moment in the game, the final nail in the coffin of white's position is another brilliant move, sacrificing the rook c8, and white resigns. This is again a deflection tactic because this queen is guarding the c2 and d2 squares, and once it leaves the guard of the d2 square, queen d2 check happens and queen g2 will be checkmate. So after rook c8, brilliant move, Nicolas Theodorou resigned this game. Obviously heartbreaking for him, but a very, very, very beautiful game. And let me show you my game at the end of this video. I played a veteran. His name is Yeshkobil Shainaev. He's from Uzbekistan. And he's a very risky guy. He likes also spicy food, probably, because he goes for the modern defense. And he goes for this setup with the opposite side castling, where we are both going at each other's throat. Well, he's not castled yet, but obviously black can only castle kingside or stay in the center, which is also dangerous. And this never ends in a draw. These positions end in checkmate for white or black. I sometimes play this with black myself. I'm a modern defense aficionado, but I know how risky it is, and you have to be very bold to do this against me, who is an attacking player. So we get this position, and he's pushing the pawns, and c4 is not optimal. Having big experience in this line, I know that this is not the way to proceed. Here I am out of my book, but I know that I should be much better. And I'm just rotating my knights to the king side. But before that, I erect this pawn chain to combat this bishop, and this pawn chain combats the other bishop. So I'm just combating all his counterplay. Also here, he wants to take on e4 with the knight, and then take with the bishop with check and win my h1 rook. So I'm preventing that. And also I have a clear plan of going h5, and once he goes g5, I can erect my knight on f5. And I have a big advantage. Again, the evil bar is glitching. Let me turn it off. Chess.com, guys, I know you're watching me. Please do something about your evil bar. So queen c7. Queen c7 is a move in the wrong direction. At least I think black should go e6 here, controlling the f5 square. Queen c7 is too slow. I push h5. Now, if black goes g5, I can even sack a piece here. I was considering this. And then push h6 and break through. The king is still in the center, and it's horrible. But even easier, I think, is to put the knight on f5. That's my number one move that I was thinking of. But he didn't go g5. He went b4. And here I calculated lots of lines. I can take and go knight f4, taking the g6 pawn, and he will be made to go king f7, losing the castling rights. This is good for me, I calculated. I calculated g5 as well, nice pawn break, also good for me. I had lots of options, you know, as the Germans say, where die Wahl hat die Qual. Who has the choice has some problems because he has to choose. Also, I calculated cb, c3, takes, and rook d3 takes. And I thought that this should be better for me. It seems like I'm winning at least this pawn in this endgame. But why go to an endgame if his king is about to get checkmated? He will have much bigger problems than a disadvantage of one pawn. So I did not take this pawn. I went for prophylaxis, rook c3. The idea is once he takes, I don't want to take with my queen because my queen and my bishop are forming this powerful battery on his king side. I take with the rook. And actually the engine says I'm a +2 already. I played this game at 91% accuracy, not so bad. And here he completely collapsed, but there is no way for him to get out of this. Already the engine says +2.3. So he decided his pawn is on c3 is also hanging because my bishop and my rook are attacking it. So he decided to go d5, but now e5 and his knight has no squares. He goes knight g8, which is a very sad choice. And here I take and go knight f4. His g6 pawn is hanging. He has to go knight f8. This looks like some freestyle chess Fischer random position. All his pieces are very clumsy. I go queen c2. I also was thinking of bishop d3, nice move, putting more pressure on g6, and if he takes, he loses the queen, but I decided queen c2 looks better. Both, the engine says both are good. I'm already +3.5 because this is hanging, and if he goes with the king here, then I had in mind this sacrifice, and I'm crushing completely winning. If he goes queen c6, I was intending to go e6, blocking this queen from defense of g6. The engine says I can even sacrifice the knight on d5 here, but I was not thinking of this, and it's not necessary to sacrifice material if you're still winning. Why risk it? But for somehow he went not queen c6 but queen d7. I don't know, out of desperation. And I just took his rook, which was trapped in the corner, took a pawn. And here from afar I calculated that if he attacks my rook, which he did with his bishop, I have a nice tactic, a brilliant move, knight h5. I'm allowing him to capture my rook because then knight f6 will be a fork, winning the queen. He did not take my rook, instead he went here, and the game continued for some more time, but I'm up an exchange and two pawns. He tries to go for some counterplay with his bishop, but I just calmly sidestep with my king. Now I go bishop h3, developing my final piece, attacking his e6 pawn. He defends it, and now I go rook g3. Rook g3 is defending g5, and I'm preparing to push f5 and just to create a collapse for him in the center. He pushes a4. I'm avoiding all nonsense by going a3, preventing all counterplay by my opponent. He gives up the a4 pawn to create some counterplay on the b file, but I'm calmly pinning his rook, and once the king sidesteps, I'm retreating and I'm defending everything. Now I'm up an exchange and 3 pawns. He goes bishop d3, and to avoid any counterplay of his, I just get rid of this bishop of his and go bishop f1 to take this pawn with the bishop. Now he wants to go rook b3, so I capture with the queen now, and I'm up 4 pawns, more than enough to convert this. I'm threatening him with the queen trade. I'm pushing a4 to develop the bishop to b5 to block the b file. He goes queen a8. Attacking the pawn, I'm defending it, avoiding all complications, and here he blunders because queen c5 attacks both the rook and the knight. And if he goes here, rook h8 is checkmate in several moves, so he gives up his knight with check, and here he resigns the game, and I'm on 3 out of 4 rounds. Wish me luck in the next round. Don't forget to comment if you like this video, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.